Well, you know the deal. If it's Friday morning, it's time for another episode of the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series. I'm Steve Casillo. Appreciate you being here today. And as always, on Fridays, right over there, right over my left shoulder, is Phillip Washington Jr. Say hello to the audience.
Buenos dias.
Because it's National, National Hispanic Heritage Month,
Is it really?
which started yesterday.
Okay, that's all. I did that on purpose.
It is, in fact, it's not called National. It's Hispanic Heritage Month because it's Mexican Independence Day, and there are about 3 other Latin countries that are also celebrating Independence Days this week as well.
That's awesome.
But I was actually going to start off saying that for the audience and for you, I wore my fall colors today, the orange shirt with the brown shirt, because fall starts in about 4 or 5 days.
Yes.
And so I can feel it's like there's this coolness in the air. It's only going to be 95 today. And then I see you show up with your financial Phil Ossifer shirt today.
Yes. I am appreciative of it. I'm about to wear it into Home Depot after this too.
So I can't wait till someone comes up to you and says, "What is the financial Phil Ossifer?" So that I hope that leads to something great.
I'm sure it will.
Today we are talking about the problems with using facts in investing. And this stems from your podcast, Wealth Building Made Simple, where you talked about this on your podcast earlier today. Those that follow the podcast here know that we take the topic that you talk about earlier in the day, and we rehash that on this podcast as well. The problem with using facts in investing. So, can I start you with a fact?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is a monetary or financial fact. While consumers are suffering at the gas pump with $3 and $4 a gallon, Shell Oil posted an $18 billion profit in the 3 months of the second quarter, January, February, March, April, May, and June. Second quarter of 2022, $18 billion in profit. That's a fact. Now, what's the problem with using facts in investing?
The man, you threw that out there and you just took me in a whole different direction. I'm gonna answer your question. Maybe we can come back to the Shell thing.
Okay.
So, but the problem with using facts in investing is the word facts mean like basically it's already done, like, right? What's done is done. And so if a company made all that money and you get that fact of Exxon today, well, go look up on the chart, you're gonna see the stock has already run up.
Right.
So you missed, like, the facts are out. You missed it. And facts are just like present circumstances. From an investment standpoint, in order to make money, you want to bet on the future. So making your investment decision with the foundation of the past is a terrible idea. I mean, that's how you end up like buying a taxi cab when Uber is right behind you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's the major problem with using facts as a foundation is it's already done. It's the past, and facts change. I think on the podcast too, I talked about, what is true about facts. Or a couple of different observations. The facts depend on who's observing them, right? So we got a war going on right now. Use that analogy, and people are going to present the facts based on based on like what country is looking at it, and even within countries, we all got different perspectives on the facts we perceive from the war. Even the quote unquote fact of Shell making their $18 billion profit, that fact meant different things to everybody. Like when you said it, it meant different things to me than it meant to other people based on on how they hear it. So
Right, because this and this being a consumer related
Yeah.
episode, I'm throwing that out there for the consumers that hey, we're all hurting at the gas pump, while Shell
Yep.
is like, hey, this is a record profit for us.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it means different things.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about the war and different countries having different perspectives on this war. It kind of reminds me. There's a scene from the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail where King Arthur meets up with the Black Knight. And you've got, for instance, then King Arthur would be Ukraine, and the Black Knight would be Russia. And the Black Knight is about to take you cannot cross this bridge without defeating the Black Knight. And so he wields his sword, and he chops off the Black Knight's arm. And he says, oh, it's just a flesh wound. And he comes back, and he chops off the other arm. He goes, come here, let me kick you in the bum. and eventually he's down to just a stump. And the Black Knight is like, get back here and fight. And it that whole scene reminds me, is Russia winning the war? Doesn't appear to be.
Well, and even on the analogy, I bet if we were here and we can interview Putin, he might say, no, we're King Arthur, right? Because the Black Knight to them is America who carved up the USSR.
It's all about perspective.
It's all about perspective.
Right.
You know?
In your podcast, you were talking about principles, and let's just go and tee that up and talk about principles.
Yeah. So a thing when you're investing is, there's an analogy of a farmer who is teaching some new farmers how to farm, how to harvest a crop, and the farmers were like, well, hey, like, look, what we have the wheat growing, but there's also with the wheat growing, like the chaff growing around it, right? And they're like, he's like, just don't worry about it. It's time for harvest. And then the harvest comes, and then he says, all right, now separate the wheat from the shaft, and take the shaft, the outer part of it, and just burn it up. Put the wheat over here, right? Wheat, symbolic terms, is like what they used back in the day for making bread, and bread was like the staple of what we needed to sustain, life to eat. And so the thing is, you want to separate the principle from the fact, right? Because if you only see things as facts and you miss the principles, then you miss the opportunity from an investment standpoint. Let me give us a very specific example, right? We can even go back to the oil thing and stay on the same thing. So the fact was, energy prices went up, Shell made money, right? That's a present fact. But if you want to look at the principle, right? You want to look at the principle behind it and make a educated guess moving forward on what's going to happen. Then you go to, okay, we know things change, we know economic situations change, right? We know a principle is as harmony as there's more disharmony, right? Meaning, like, as the world goes from being globally cooperative and doing business together, and they become less cooperative, right? In the past, the principle is when you have division, you have increased inflation. Which, think of inflation like world energy, and let me show you something. Like, if let's say you have two business partners, right? Two friends.
Yep.
And they're in business together. If they're in harmony, the business runs better. Costs are low, there's more profits. When the friends are not in harmony, you have an increased cost of business, right? Because now they don't share perspective, which means they have two different types of expenses that they have. There's no harmony, the profits drop, right? It happens in marriage too, right? And so the principle of division is increased cost, less profitable, disharmony. So you look at it and you say, okay, now I'm getting the idea of what's happening, right? As the world becomes more conflict oriented, right? Then what should I expect, right? The cost of things to rise. And there's other principles where when money's dying, we price oil in dollars, right? But everything is relative to. So if the value of the dollar is going down, the price of oil goes up. Meaning, if people lose faith in the dollar for whatever reason, as a store of value, then oil prices go up. So the principle behind it, if you understand that allows you to say, all right, 5 years from now, is Shell still going to be a good bet from an investment standpoint because of the principles behind the facts, not just the facts alone, because the facts are what they are today.
Okay. So investing in Shell after they've posted their $18 billion profit, it's not a good investment because their stock's already gone up.
From a standalone fact, if that's your only basis for making the investment, that's not a good foundation. But if you say, well, yeah, you know, I'm looking at the world and I have a relative estimation based on my understanding of principles and what's going on, that that we're going through deglobalization, which means more higher costs over the next 5 years, and people are going to trust paper money less, which I tend to agree. Then you might say, yeah, Shell made $18 billion profit, but that's nothing compared to what they're going to make over the next 5 to 10 years because of the continued disharmony and lack of peace among economic participants across the world.
Yeah. And while you were making your last point, I took out my phone and looked up Shell stock, and it was in June, which was part of that second quarter. June, they posted their highest stock. It was like $62 a share, which sounds really cheap for me for a company that makes $18 billion profit. But $62 a share, which was the highest they had been in about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's jumping on the bandwagon after they've posted profits is from what. Now, I'm not the financial Phil Ossifer, but I would assume jumping on the bandwagon after after the point is not good thinking.
Not good thinking. Again, with the caveat that if that's your only basis for making the investment is the headline news, then no. Which the vast majority of people that don't understand the principles, that's exactly what they do. They buy it because of, like, they get scared because of inflation numbers that are recorded in the past.
Yeah.
Or they buy a stock because it went up and or there's profits. I'm like, that's like eating the shaft. Like, you're like I'm gonna eat the shaft for nourishment. That's the external shell around the wheat. Like,
Right. That's the stuff you throw away.
Yeah, you want to eat the wheat, not the shaft. Has no nutrients in it.
If someone wanted to reach out to Phillip Washington Jr. and maybe ask about what type of wheat they should plant, or if it's too late to invest in this or that, if someone had questions about the financial Phil Ossifer, how do they reach out to you?
Two good places. Phillip Washington Jr. is if you want my perspective on investing in podcasting and building that. StonehillWealthManagement.com if you want to speak to me about separating the wheat from the chaff from a investment standpoint in the stock market or crypto market.
That's right. You have just launched on your website basically a podcast marketing group.
Yeah, a course on how to monetize a podcast, not how to put up one, because we have a great local studio, Podcast Mansfield Studio, shout out, that can help you set up and do all that stuff. But this is about like how to monetize it specifically. Like, even if you own a business, just a Mansfield business, a regular business, right? Learning how to sell stuff in a digital age is going to require a podcast, and the later you realize that, the more it's going to cost you, like inflation.
Right.
Don't get caught by the tax.
It's Phillip Washington Jr., and we do this every Friday here on the podcast. Phillip, let's do it again next week.
I look forward to it. Thank you.